Hi everyone, welcome. Super excited to be here. Thank you so much to everybody who's joining us today. If you tried to join on Tuesday, apologies about the date mix-up. We are here. We are live with Jay Filiatrault now. I'm super excited for this session on connecting products, sales, and CS in HubSpot. We're going to get going in just a couple of minutes here. Everybody is joining, if you want to say hi in the chat, if you want to let us know where you're joining us from, and if there is a burning question, a burning topic that you are excited to hear about, we have a little agenda that we're going to run through. More on that in a second, but we will have plenty of time for questions as well at the end for anything that we don't get to. So let us know in the chat if there is anything that you are particularly excited to be here to hear about. Otherwise, we will get going in just a minute or two. Jay, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked on the last workshop, and it went kind of well. Totally a stolen icebreaker. But if you had to listen to a movie score, music from a movie forever, one movie for the rest of your life, which movie would you pick?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I'm actually an audiophile and I love watching movies. I just feel like it's two different moods. Like I can't say like I pay attention to the score when I'm watching a movie. I really don't know. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is 8 Mile. Not because it's like crazy innovative score, just as like I'm a huge Eminem, or I was a huge Eminem fan growing up. But I'm sure there's better answers in terms of like composition and quality of production.
Yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily has to be the scoring mechanism for the question.
Agreed. As an audiophile, I feel like it should be. Like my favorite producer is BT, Brian Transo, and he's scored a lot of movies, including the first Fast and the Furious. So I'd love to re-listen to the score knowing that it was BT that wrote it, because I didn't pay attention to it when I watched the movie. But I'll stick with 8 Mile.
Nice. I always go Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. Yeah, I just love the music in that movie.
Did they write a score specifically for that movie, or they licensed popular songs?
They licensed popular songs.
Okay,
I mean, there probably is some music written there, but I don't think it's certainly not the majority of the music there.
I'll have to listen to that score again then.
Yeah, it helps that it's a favorite movie for me, so
it's among definitely my top 10 as well.
Gonna go together. Cool. Okay, so we have a ton of stuff that we want to cover today. I'm super excited for this. I'm Stuart Bolcom, head of growth at Arrows. I'm super excited about this because I've been talking about customer success and what happened, being able to run things beyond the point of sale in HubSpot for a while now. And I ran into Jay Filiatrault from Chameleon, head of growth there, on LinkedIn, and some of his content. And I thought what he was doing over Chameleon was super interesting, and it was approaching things and doing things that I had not covered and had not necessarily thought of covering. So I'm really excited to have Jay here to really just get in the weeds, give us a behind-the-scenes look of what he is doing over there and how you can do it yourself. Take some ideas away to go implement yourself. I'm going to let Jay introduce himself real quick, give us a sort of 30 seconds on Chameleon and what he does in his role at Chameleon.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Stuart. I'm really excited about this session as well. It's rare that I get into the weeds and talk about like tech implementation and data stuff. So it's something I can talk about for hours. So excited for this session. I'll have to try to condense my time to make sure we get it all within the 40-minute mark. So Jay Filiatrault, head of growth at Chameleon. Chameleon is a product adoption platform. So if you're not familiar with the category, think onboarding checklists, step-by-step guides, guiding new users through the interface, or guiding existing users through new features that they may not be currently leveraging. Been with the company for just over a year now. I was actually a customer for 4 years prior to that. I was in more of a lifecycle marketing role previous to Chameleon in a B2C company that made technology for music producers. and we drove really significant lift. It was a fully PLG motion, absolutely no sales touch. We drove really big lifts in activation, free-to-pay conversion, upsell revenue through in-apps with Chameleon, but also having really cohesive multi-channel engagement campaigns through email and other channels as well. So segmentation, personalization was part of our day-to-day, and brought some of that into Chameleon. Obviously, the volumes are a little bit smaller, the segment sizes are a little bit smaller, but really excited to share how we centralized all of our data in CRM to be the basis of all of that personalization, automation, triggers when it is a little bit more high touch. Even though we've had limited resources and don't have a data warehouse, and
Totally, yeah,
a little bit of hackish setup.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what people want to see. I mean, hopefully that's it's really helpful to see what it actually looks like to go implement this stuff as a company that's scaling really quickly, and try to solve this problem, which I have up on the screen here, which I posted about this today, but from I first saw this in writing on Intercom's blog in 2016, I think. So many companies have a customer experience that looks like an Office directory. You go to the website, and that's totally different than talking to sales. It's totally different experience than talking to CS or support. And if you don't want that to be the experience for the customer, on the back end of that, you need to think through and connect that experience by defining and operationalizing a process, the data, all the things that are sort of the backbone of what the customer sees on the front end. So that's what we're going to get into today. Really quick agenda here. As I mentioned, we're going to try to have plenty of time for questions at the end, which means we have a lot to cover here. We're going to talk about a little bit about sort of why HubSpot as the place, and specifically in Chameleon's case, what sort of went into that decision. As Jay mentioned, centralizing data in the CRM, the always favorite or always popular health scoring, and how Jay's doing that in HubSpot, tracking specific customer segments and engaging them in different tools, and then intent signals, which is one that I'm particularly interested to hear Jay's take on. So one PSA, as always, this workshop is being recorded. We will send the recording after, so if you have to drop off, if you want somebody else on your team to be able to take a look, it is being recorded, and we will get you that as soon as the session is done. The first question that I want to pose, and I'm going to add this poll over in the chat. If I can figure out how to do this, then you can answer this question if I start it in the chat. And I'm really curious to hear, where are you currently working out of? There are lots of options, lots of different places that you could be working out of as a go-to-market team. Maybe teams are in different places, maybe they're all in one. But where are you working out of today, or where are your teams working out of today? And I'm going to ask Jay and sort of hand this over to him a little bit. Before you implemented everything that we're going to look at today in HubSpot, what was sort of the situation on the ground at Chameleon? What were the tools that teams were using? What were the different places that work was happening, sort of before you made the investment in all the systems that you've built today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the majority of the workflow was already in HubSpot, but there was an incomplete view of customer data, and the book of business essentially that CSMs was running. A lot of the product data was in our portal, in our backend essentially, and you had to query a specific customer to see how many experiences they had live, how many MAUs they had running through the platform that we're sending data for, what their users were, or the activity level of each of the users within the account, for example. So I would say it was very piecemeal before we centralized all the processes and all the data in CRM. We're using CRM to action playbooks and send emails and do a bit of nurturing or booking meetings, but they had to go to other sources to get the actual data, whether that be our backend, our customer portal, a combination of that and Mixpanel, and running queries on the individual domain level to see what the completion rates of experiences are for customers, what their adoption rate for each of our features is. So I would say it was twofold. centralizing all of the workflows within HubSpot, but also just improving the existing workflows that were already kind of centralized in HubSpot to a certain extent.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned I think that's a relatively common situation, right? There's a little bit of everything, data in sort of many different places. Who are the teams that you're specifically trying to cater to? I know you mentioned previously you had a very product-led motion, so no sales touch. What does the team structure look like on the go-to-market side at Chameleon? Who is needing to interact in this system that you have today in HubSpot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say we have like a dual GTM approach. We have a self-serve, fully PLG motion for our smaller plans, our startup plans that start at like $280 a month. And then we have our growth and enterprise plan, which are more of a five-figure ACV, average customer value, or contract value, that is sales assisted, I would say. I was going to say sales led, but a lot of the ICP opportunities stem from a product sign up. People like to get their hands into the product, and before they shortlist Chameleon as one of the vendors that they want to run a POC with and negotiate with. So to answer the question more directly, we have a couple of SDRs that are their objective is to book meetings with ICP companies for our 2 AEs to close the business on. So I would say those are my main internal clients. And then we have a pretty large CS team. And this is a bit of an interesting approach, but at the moment, due to the scale of the company, the CS team is also the support team. So we have a couple of members in our 6-person CS team that have a smaller book of accounts, but they're also working on supporting our self-serve as tier 1 support. And we have a support engineer that they can escalate to if it's more technical. And then a lot of what we did within HubSpot also enabled marketing to get more attribution data and get a little bit more insights into what's driving pipeline as well. So yeah, 3 main groups, I would say, that are the internal clients to these workflows and the centralized data in CRM.
Love it. Well, let's get into that first topic of centralizing data in the CRM. I know for a lot of teams, this is, and you mentioned that sort of when you're starting out here, there was data in a number of places, not all the visibility that you would have wanted. So how did you approach that problem of bringing data into HubSpot, and sort of why was HubSpot, you mentioned not having a data warehouse. Why did you choose HubSpot as this is the place where we want to centralize all our data?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like the decision to centralize everything in HubSpot was made because there's a lot of processes that need to run through HubSpot anyways. There are some companies that have a dedicated CS platform, but I think in most cases that just creates another data silo, incomplete data, requirement for additional operations in terms of integrations and keeping the data updated in both systems. So it was logical for us to centralize the workflow of all of our go-to-market teams, including CS and HubSpot. That's where they were managing renewal opportunities, upsell opportunities. That's where we track all of our engagement with existing customers and prospects through logged emails, logged meetings. I think, part of that was just like existing processes living in HubSpot and being a very logical, a very logical place essentially to centralize all of that. And the other piece is just the breadth of integrations or the ease of integrations that are available within HubSpot. Like, for example, we use Fathom for call recording, and they have a native integration to HubSpot where you can actually listen to a call and see the AI transcript within HubSpot, within a HubSpot meeting. We use Slack for internal communications. You can add Slack DMs to the end of a workflow. Trying to think what else we integrate that is a natural extension to HubSpot.
Totally.
Livestorm, sending webinar registrations, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense to meet the team in the place that they're already at and have the data in a place where you want to integrate it with everything else that you already using. So to get into this sort of
Exactly.
what we're showing here on the screen, like what is that data specifically? Like so we sort of broke this out into some categories of data, which looks like you have nicely organized in groups on a sidebar. But what is, so can you sort of talk through the specific data that you're pulling in, and then sort of what what is the process behind, like, this is the right data to be pulling in to HubSpot? Because obviously
Yeah.
I'm assuming you don't pull absolutely everything. Like there is data which exists which you could pull in that you don't.
100%, exactly. And yeah, I think that was just taking a step back and understanding like what data can we leverage, what data can inform a specific approach or a specific playbook that we want to run with a customer. Another part of that was also looking where we can complement our existing tooling or data pipelines. Again, this might be just the result of being a small team and not having the bandwidth to build proper data pipelines at a data warehouse. But we use Segment as a CDP, but we don't do group calls. Group calls being like centralizing,
like account level data versus user level data.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you created a Chameleon account and create a tour, and we're both part of the same account, the tour created event is being fired just on your profile and not on mine. Whereas when you're selling to B2B or evaluating the overall health of a B2B account, it's more important to know what's the state of the account overall. It doesn't matter that Stuart only created 2 experiences. If his team, if he's supporting his teammate and creating dozens and dozens of experiences, that's still a very healthy account. So yeah, it was kind of twofold: understanding what data we can leverage and that informs indicators that an account is at risk, is being really successful and is really healthy, and what do we currently not have access to that complements essentially our access to that data through tools like Mixpanel, for example, if you want to get a little bit more into the weeds and diagnose how individual users are experiencing the platform. So a lot of the data that you see here is kind of aggregated, both from our backend directly, as well as from individual contact records within HubSpot. For example, when somebody logs into our dashboard, we print the last seen in dashboard date on the contact level. And then I have a workflow that updates that on a company level as well. So we can know when the last session occurred on the account level. And then we also just copy the name of the contact to the company level and override that all the time. So our CSMs or our sales team can know when somebody's in a trial, who's the prospect or who's the actual user within the account that was last active.
Yeah. It is interesting. One thing to call out here. So you sort of mentioned already the printing the most recent value. This is in properties in HubSpot. You're not using events, at least in this view. And you also have a lot of dates in here. Sort of the events on the left side are, when did an account installation happen? When was somebody last seen, as you just mentioned? Is that how is that for reporting? Is that for triggering workflows? Like, what is the sort of purpose of those?
That's a great question. Both. Definitely reporting and seeing like understanding the frequency and recency of activity within the platform. But this is also a core ingredient to our health scoring, and from a go-to-market perspective to our intent scoring as well. I think the recency of activity or an intent score, or an intent signal, I should say, is really important as to the weight that you attribute to it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I have an example, and if not, I can share my screen later to show our intent score field. But basically, the score that's attributed to each of the actions also takes into account recency. So if somebody visited our pricing page in the last 7 days, they might have a 20 points in the intent. Whereas if it was not 7 days ago, but between 14 and 30 days ago, it's only 10 or 15 points in the intent score. So we've kind of applied that approach as well from a health scoring standpoint for our customer accounts.
Totally. And one thing to mention to everybody on the call, we'll share the deck, but Jay's also been kind enough to say we can go and create actual templates that you can follow, step-by-step recipes to sort of recreate these things in your own account, which will add to the Arrows template library in the Vault. So if there are sort of very specific details, we can answer questions there, but we will also be making those templates available as well. So you also have some other data here that you're pulling into to CRM records. You have some revenue data, some sort of plan information, and one that I'm really curious about, because we do something similar, but I'm very curious how you use this utilization. I think I called it utilization. I'm curious what you'll call it. Category, because it's a little different than the plan and sort of revenue information.
Yeah, correct. The revenue data, I think, is a good way for CSMs to understand their book of business. We do things like what percentage of ARR is in good health, in medium health, and at risk. Making sure we're balancing the ARR managed by each of our CSMs as well. It's a lot easier to do when you have that data within CRM. And then from a usage standpoint, our unit of economy, or like our measure is MTUs, similar to an analytics platform. So how many users are you sending data for on a monthly basis? And this is, again, to understand like our accounts. I understand a few things. Are our customers getting the full value that they purchase the platform for? If they expected to have 50,000 MAUs see experiences on a monthly basis, and only 10,000 of them are, they may not be realizing the full value of the potential of the platform. And the other thing that we power as well, based on usage, is identifying upsell opportunities. So that's we use custom objects to print intent signals and milestones throughout the customer journey. So when somebody goes over their MTU allotment in 1 month, we'll print that as an intent signal, and that might be just a one-off. Sometimes they ran a promo, or they did a product launch and they got a bunch of traffic, and it's just a one-off exception. So we don't necessarily want to reach out and run an aggressive upsell motion when we see one instance of MAU overage in this case. And by printing it as a custom object intent signal, we can build a workflow or logic where around MTU overage happened twice in the last 90 days, for example, which is a much stronger signal to then send to our account manager and start pursuing the account for a potential upsell.
Totally. So you're sort of using it in prioritization and account planning there as well.
Correct.
And I know you've mentioned this a couple of times, that sort of as it relates to the data that you're pulling into CRM, but you're also building health scoring from that data. I'm really curious here to understand the split of sort of health, or sort of how that health score is being calculated, because it looks like, at least from this screenshot, like you have both some properties which are sort of on a scale, and could potentially be a score could potentially be behind those, but you also have this CSM sentiment property, which looks like much more open response text. I'm curious how you balance what you're doing from a health perspective on the data side with what you have that's much more qualitative, either from one-to-one interactions with customers, or just other data that is not as not actually a score.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I mean, I think in an ideal world, you have the volume, and you can run a regression analysis on your most successful customers, and have AI or machine learning models suggest what are the indications of a healthy customer and a customer that's at risk or might not be getting full value out of the platform. In the absence of that, we tried to recreate that ourselves. I would say that, so the ingredients to the customer health are a combination of another field that's not being shown here, which is product health, and CSM sentiment. The product health is it is a score field on the company level that leverages pretty basic logic, I would say. Like, have they logged into the platform in the last 30 days? If they have, so they need to have logged in recently to get a point for recency. how many experiences do they have running? If you bought Chameleon and you only launched a welcome modal or tooltip to explain one feature, probably not worth paying 5 figures a year unless your volumes or your ACVs are huge. Yeah, so the volume of usage, how many experiences plays into that. The breadth of usage as well. There's a lot of different patterns within Chameleon. Checklists, tooltips, tours, micro surveys. So we understand that, like, for micro surveys, for example, there's a lot of other solutions out there that are built specifically for that, and people might already have an incumbent or a vendor that they're very happy with. So I think when I joined, if I'm not mistaken, if you weren't using all 5 features, you were getting the full score for product for feature adoption. And we've since refined that to be using 3 out of 5 of our features or our patterns is indicative of a relatively healthy account. And then the other piece that plays into that is how much of your MTU or MAU allotment are you using on a monthly basis? Again, if you're paying for 50,000 MAUs and only showing experiences to 5,000, there's probably an opportunity to expand that usage or expand your audiences in terms of engagement and product usage.
Totally. And then this CSM sentiment piece, is that a thing that is, I'm curious about the playbook behind that from a CSM perspective. Like, is that a thing that is prompted after calls? Is that a thing that is prompted at, sort of a time-based prompt for the CSMs to update this? Like, how does that come in? Because I think it's often, and I know there's a lot of talk in the CS community, especially, measurement of outcomes is defined by the customer as opposed to by the company and the product features. And this seems like this is sort of a step towards that, like, how are we measuring what the customer cares about? Because
Correct.
It's a little more qualitative. Does this feed into the score, or is this sort of a separate thing?
Yeah, it does feed into the score. So the product health, which is not shown here, but I kind of just explained, and the CSM sentiment, which is really kind of a qualitative score, are combined into the customer health. So if you're poor product health but good CSM sentiment, you'll be a yellow on customer health. The CSM sentiment is kind of a gut feeling, but we've been refining the approach or the criteria to that a little bit more over time. Like for example, when you're onboarding a new customer, there are some key criteria that are important, such as having a champion. Are people proactive or quick in booking onboarding calls and best practice calls? Do we have a mutual action plan? Do we feel as though the objectives for the company are clear? Like, what's their measure of success in using Chameleon? So I think, like, for a new customer during onboarding and like pre like value realization, the criteria are pretty well defined. And there are some key touch points. We have an onboarding pipeline within HubSpot, and at each of the stages, the CRM prompts the CSM to provide their CSM sentiment, and then there's reminders. We aim to refresh a CSM sentiment on a quarterly basis, at the very least, on a monthly basis for our higher touch enterprise accounts. So if the CSM sentiment is aging, that also triggers a task and a Slack notification for our CSMs to update the sentiment. And then we run a quick playbook, essentially. So we just have like a form to fill in,
Totally.
which populates the CSM sentiment detail, CSM sentiment date, and the new score, essentially, that they just inputted.
Yeah, I love hearing the sort of playbook behind the data in the CRM, because I think that's one of the things that, if you're integrating data from the product, it's coming in automatically, and maybe you're not, like, the integration is the work, whereas when it's things like this, it's much more the people process, the definition of that playbook. And like you mentioned, the sort of iterating on that playbook so it actually lines up with and gives you the expected output when you're
Yeah,
following it.
I think that's really important. If you like, people in CS and sales have to do a lot of data entry. If you simplify that workflow as much as possible, it ensures data coverage and accuracy throughout the CRM, and just enforces the discipline to make sure that all your records are up to date.
Totally. Cool. Just conscious of time here. We can go sort of quickly through these next couple. Make sure we get to cover all the topics that we have, and as I mentioned, we can come back. We'll have templates for these things, and we'll have the recording and everything as well. So this one's sort of interesting. Customer segments, which you're essentially building a list here based on all the data that you're piping into, both the data that you're piping in from external sources, but also engagement and sort of activity that's happening on records that you have in the CRM. Is there anything notable that you think is maybe folks aren't doing that they should be doing, that you've learned as a sort of part of this process of putting these building these segments in HubSpot lists?
I think an interesting approach, like people often think of leveraging firmographic data and technographic data from building an ICP list or a target list for sales. I think it has a lot of benefit in post-sales motions as well. For example, if we know based on built with data or Clearbit data that our customer is using HubSpot as a CRM, they likely have a lot of customer data in the CRM, and we have a native CRM integration to HubSpot. If they're not leveraging that data to build segments and personalization within Chameleon, that's likely a huge missed opportunity. And also a way just to make a very hyper relevant recommendation, rather than, hey, we have 40 integrations, why don't you explore all of them? Like, hey, you use HubSpot, these are the benefits of integrating Chameleon with HubSpot, would you like to try it out? So personalization, identifying opportunities, I think, for providing additional value. The trigger that you were showing there for a workflow is also just based on what we know anecdotally is a measure of success for our current customers. In that case, we were looking at people who have a lot of step-by-step tours live, but are not aggregating them into a checklist, which enables self-serve on demand. So that's just like a hyper targeted play that we ran. If you have more than 5 tours live and you're not using a checklist, why don't you try putting that into a curated curated step-by-step list in the checklist, so people don't.
Totally. And I know the one thing you wanted to call out, or that we talked about a little bit before, is that you're then using those lists that you're building in HubSpot with all the data, but you're not necessarily only using HubSpot in that sort of workflow of engaging with those customers. You also have in-app engagement, which you're not doing in HubSpot. You have email, which you're not doing in HubSpot. I guess why not HubSpot for some of those specific things? And then what is the what's been the benefit of having that integration, having that data which is segmented so tightly from HubSpot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure I can give a comprehensive answer as to why not HubSpot for email marketing. Our website's built on a custom CMS that I think offers a little bit more flexibility than HubSpot would. We're also partners and big fans of Customer.io from an email marketing standpoint, or comprehensive user journey standpoint. So I think part of that is loyalty, or just the existing setup cost as well. I think we're probably paying less for that marketing platform than we would for Marketing Hub, and since our website's is built on a custom CMS, it just doesn't make sense to buy Marketing Hub just for email marketing. I think this approach can, instead of having custom code, it sends a webhook and sends an event from HubSpot to Customer.io. In this case, you can just have people join, or put people into a sequence or an email marketing campaign instead of running that webhook. I think it's really important to have a centralized repository for all your customer data and a base for all your customer segmentation. That way there's cohesive engagement and user journeys throughout those different channels. And again, HubSpot made sense there because Chameleon has a native integration to HubSpot. So I can build segments, lists within HubSpot that update dynamically in Chameleon. I can build an audience of people that are in this specific HubSpot list. And yeah, we basically leverage HubSpot because it's already the main source of the data, and also it's the only place, because again, we don't do group calls, where we have account level statuses. So it just makes sense for that to be the source of the data.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really it's really interesting. Like, it shows the value of having tools that can talk to each other, with unified data, right? Like being able to use the data that you have in HubSpot effectively means that you need that integration to a tool that knows what to do with that data.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm putting this up on the screen because I'm curious for folks who are here. Like, one of the we've sort of talked through a lot of different topics. We have one more as well with intent signals, but I'm really curious, like, what feels like the biggest blocker for folks to going and implementing these things, to going and actually connecting all that data that Jay's talked about in one place, because it really does unlock all of these other things that you can then go do with that data. So is it the data integration? Is it the the implementation, the technical side of things? What is it, or what does it feel like is the biggest blocker to connecting your teams and your process in? I'm asking specifically HubSpot, but connecting your teams in one place, I guess, is the most important thing here. So I'll leave that there while we go on to we just sort of mentioned this, but the data is only as valuable as being able to, or the team being able to go and act on it. And Jay, I know you mentioned intent signals earlier, and the sort of structure of the team, the SDRs, the AEs that are interacting with that those intent signals, but also that they can apply to CS as well. Talk a little bit about this part of the process, like how did this come to, how did this become part of the system? Like, what's been the impact of having those scores in folks' sort of day-to-day work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll try to keep it short because I could talk about this for half an hour. But I think it's something that we optimized over time. The catalyst to having an intent score and printing intent signals was our sales team or our SDRs were spending too much time in qualifying accounts and trying to understand where people were in their buying journey. So we wanted to make sure that we reduced the signal to noise ratio and had them focus on ICP accounts that are most likely to be in market at the time. And once we kind of optimized that from a go-to-market standpoint, we realized that there was a lot of opportunity from a CS perspective. So intent score is based on engagement on our website, third-party signals such as people viewing competitive alternatives or our category pages essentially on G2. They might be shopping around for an alternative. Therefore, they're a churn risk if they're an existing customer, or they're probably in market if they're a prospect. And then key signals as well, like visiting our pricing page on the website, going over their MAU allotment, which is the main lever to pricing, hitting their limit in terms of number of experiences. Like on our startup accounts, you can only have 5 live micro surveys. So once you hit that limit and you're getting value out of micro surveys, maybe there's an opportunity to upgrade to growth. So yeah, it was like, I guess, multi-pronged approach, intent score to identify the accounts that we want to be engaging. And now that we have an intent score, what are the ingredients to the intent score so the rep can have some perspective or can customize the approach and approach them with highly relevant messaging. So that's where we decided to print intent signals as a custom object, so our teams can understand what are the ingredients to the intent score. And then the last piece is building automations on top of that. What's a relevant what's a relevant signal for our sales team? It's an ICP company that hits the intent threshold, that doesn't currently have a paid plan. Pretty straightforward. And then for our CS team, that's not relevant. If they're on our website and they're looking at feature pages and stuff, like, great, they're just engaged with the brand, with the product. But going over your MTU allotment or checking out G2 for alternatives is a signal that we want to bubble up to our CS team, for example, as a potential signal for risk.
Yeah, how do you bubble that up? Is that like email notifications? Is that tasks in HubSpot? Is that playbooks? Like, what is the sort of internal team member facing view? Like, how do they know, like, oh, this is an account that I should be going and looking at the intent signals for to figure out what to do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think we need to refine or standardize that across teams a little bit more. Like for our CS team, it's mainly tasks. Like, hey, review this account. They've been spiking for intent on G2. Might be at risk or might be shopping for an alternative. In the case of upsell signals or opportunities for upsell, we only have one account manager managing hundreds and hundreds of clients. So having a bunch of tasks in CRM can quickly get overwhelming for them. So we send them a Slack DM. Hey, this account is ICP. They've exceeded their MTU allotment for 2 months in a row. But might be mutually beneficial to discuss an upgrade to their contract. Yeah, so a little bit of a combination of both, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I know this topic was, or this session was always going to be tough to keep the time. There's so much great stuff in here. So I certainly want to open it up the last few minutes that we have here for any questions. As we mentioned, we'll be sharing the deck, sharing the recording of this session. Jay was also kind enough to make some of these things available as templates in the Arrows vault. So we'll make sure that you know when those are available and accessible if you want to implement any of this stuff yourself. If you want to drop questions in the chat, really quickly mention Arrows and where we sort of fit into this whole piece, because just like Chameleon is a tool for in-app adoption and engagement with customers. If you're running a more one-to-one human-led onboarding process specifically, then Arrows is a sort of customer collaboration layer on top of your HubSpot account. So connects a customer-facing plan to drive engagement with all your data in HubSpot. So if you are looking to connect all of your go-to-market teams in one place, as we sort of talked about throughout this session, and you are running that one-to-one process in the sort of onboarding stage of the journey, Arrows fits in really natively there. But we'll love to hear any questions that the folks have. Jay, we could talk for hours about this stuff.
Agreed.
One thing that I know you had in the notes that didn't make it into the deck that I'm really curious about, because I think is that hopefully if folks take one thing away, there's a really interesting win that you mentioned, which is when you're building these sort of onboarding engagement sequences. You had a note that was, we front-loaded information in email and saw 25% lift in activation. What did that look like? Why was that a test that you ran?
To be honest, it's because we saw another company have success with it. They posted about it on LinkedIn, and it's like, might as well try it out. Our free sign up activation is not as good as it can be, a little bit below industry benchmarks, and we had been playing with the content a little bit, making minor tweaks to our more linear onboarding flow, whereas like day one, play with the sandbox and install. Once you've installed, now you wait another day to get the next email to teach you how to build your first experience. And what we saw is our most motivated customers were activating and installing and starting their trial very, very quickly within 24 hours. Just looking at like funnel analysis in Mixpanel. So we decided to front load all of the resources and instructional content that a new signup might need in email one. And we were hoping that serves a few purposes. First of all, it's an email that they can always go back to and that they can leverage whenever they're ready. If they get through the steps very quickly, or if they take a lot longer and it take 2 weeks to even get back into the platform to start using it, it's really easy for them to go back and search Chameleon welcome or whatever in their email and find that resource rather than having to sift through multiple emails. And it's also a resource that they can forward to their teammates if they're inviting people to collaborate within their account.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Did you continue to send emails beyond that, or you just cut the sequence to one?
No, we still have a few additional emails. Most of them are based on action or inaction. Like if you signed up and you haven't installed within 7 days, that's really outside of the norm that we see. So then we understood both from assumptions or informed guesses as well as customer feedback, what are the potential barriers to installation. Is it going to take me too much time? So we really addressed that in an email. For an experienced API developer, it's going to take them 10 minutes to install Chameleon. If you're worried about security, we're SOC 2 compliant. Here's a link to our security page on our website. If you're using an odd framework for your platform, here's developer docs on how to embed Chameleon within, I don't know, React wrapped in Cordova mobile framework. So very specific instructions. Yeah, then it's mainly, like I say, based on inaction, I would say. When we've seen the majority of signups perform a specific action, we try to counter what might be the potential barrier or the objection at that point with subsequent emails.
Nice, awesome. Well, I know we are at time here. Like I said, we could definitely talk forever on this topic. Maybe we'll have to come back and do a part 2. But we're going to put together templates and make those available to folks for things we've talked about here. Thank you so much, Jay, for doing this. This was a blast.
Pleasure.
Where should folks go to connect with you, find out more about Chameleon, and reach out if they have questions?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was great. I'm very active and responsive on LinkedIn. So Jay Filiatrault on LinkedIn. Our company's pretty active as well and posting thought leadership, best practices around PLG, self-serve adoption in general, but also keeping everybody up to date, or our audience up to date on product updates. You can also email me anytime at j@chameleon.io.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everybody who joined us. We'll make the templates available in the Vault on the Arrows website, arrows.to/vault. There's 65 plus templates there already. So if you have things you're trying to implement in HubSpot, if you want to see how Arrows fits in, that is a great place to start. But thank you everybody for joining. We'll send out the recording. Thank you so much to Jay, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.